A quiet soul apartment became the hiding place for a girl running from the man who called himself her father. With a tiger ring and silent threats, Park Dasick thought no one would dare stand in his way, especially not a neighbor with too many secrets of his own. But Yu Jae-hin had once worked for men like Park, and this time he chose to fight back. Just wait until you see how this hallway confrontation exploded and why justice, in the end, didn't come quietly. Jung Min-ji had never been the type to believe in new beginnings. But moving into a 10-story office-tel in Gwangju was her quiet rebellion against the life she left behind, against the weight of everything that had collapsed in Seoul's more expensive corners. The building itself was nothing special. Cracked tiles in the lobby, faded notices pinned to the corkboard near the mailboxes, a flickering security camera that made a soft mechanical whir whenever you walked under it. Rent was cheap, the plumbing was passable, and the door to her unit locked twice with a satisfying click. That, in her mind, was enough. Her new neighbor lived across the hall, Unit 4B, Yu Jae-hyun, the kind of man who smiled like a teacher on his first day of class, warm, practiced, and slightly too perfect. He had an unassuming presence, clean sneakers, simple button-ups, sleeves rolled to the forearm. The kind of man you'd forget in a crowd, but in the quiet halls of the building, he stood out. He held elevator doors even when you were still halfway down the hall. He returned Amazon packages that were delivered to the wrong units. He once left fresh red bean bread at every door on the 4th floor during Chuseok, individually wrapped with a note, "Stay warm, neighbor." People liked him, or at least they appreciated the shape of his kindness. But kindness, Min-ji had learned, could be a curtain, and behind curtains, sometimes, were rooms no one wanted to enter. At first, she didn't pay much attention. The building was full of people who kept to themselves. Nurses working night shifts, freelance animators rarely seen in daylight, college students drifting in and out between semesters. Everyone passed each other with nods or nothing at all, and that was fine. But after a few weeks, she started noticing things. Small things. Packages left at Jae-hyun's door arrived under different names. Not once or twice, but often. So Haejin, Kim Haerin, Lee Junho. Some were scribbled in rushed handwriting, others printed professionally. The contents were odd for a single man. Children's chewable vitamins, feminine hygiene products, a box labeled silicone bandages hypoallergenic. Once, during a bout of insomnia, Min-ji sat near her door at 2 in the morning, hugging her knees and listening to the soft hum of the hallway. She wasn't proud of it, but old habits die hard. She needed to feel in control again. That night, she heard a strange tapping from behind Jae-hyun's door. Not a knock, not footsteps, a pattern. 3 soft taps, pause, then 2 more. It could have been anything. Pipes, furniture being moved, but something about it sounded deliberate, like a signal waiting for a response. She told herself not to think about it. Min-ji wasn't there to dig. She had her own ghosts to outpace. Her last apartment had ended in shouting matches, sleepless nights, and a final slammed door that had left her bracing for sounds long after silence settled in. Here, she wanted calm, predictability, lock the door, make tea, breathe. And yet, curiosity pressed in like steam against glass. She began watching him, not obsessively, but with the kind of quiet attention survivors often give to patterns. Jae-hyun left in the early mornings, returned just after sundown. He carried reusable grocery bags. He always brought an extra umbrella and left it in the rack downstairs. He smiled when he passed anyone, but never asked questions, never lingered. His smile was full of light, but it cast no shadow. That, Min-ji thought, was the strangest part. Then came the hallway moment. She was returning from the convenience store one night, a plastic bag of instant noodles and milk jangling at her side, when she saw him exiting the elevator. His arms were full of groceries, and he moved to unlock his door, but paused when he saw her. "Ah, you're back," he said, smiling like they were old friends. "If the walls are thin, I apologize. I'm trying to fix a leak." His tone was soft, almost apologetic.
His eyes crinkled at the corners like they were used to smiling more than speaking. Minji blinked. "It's fine," she replied automatically, managing a small nod. "I didn't hear anything." It was a lie, but one she wasn't sure why she told. The elevator doors behind her closed with a soft chime. And for a moment too long, Jae-hyun held her gaze. His expression didn't change, still that same pleasant smile. But his eyes felt sharper than before. Not cruel, not intrusive, but aware. He was reading her, she realized. Not the way someone flirts or searches for an opening, but the way someone takes stock of mood, posture, tone, like he was cataloging her response and filing it somewhere useful. That, in her mind, was enough. Minji broke the gaze first and disappeared into her apartment, locking both bolts with mechanical precision. As she leaned her forehead against the door, her pulse steadying, one thought floated through her mind. Cold and unwelcome. That smile. It hides something. Not in the obvious cinematic way. There were no dramatic clues. No blood on the floor, no locked doors with sounds behind them. Just a man who was too kind, too invisible, too composed. And Jung Min-ji, who had learned the hard way to trust what made her skin crawl more than what made her feel safe, couldn't let go of the feeling that Yoo Jae-hyun was not what he seemed. Not at all. Not even close.
2 days after that elevator conversation, the leak Yoo Jae-hyun had casually mentioned turned into something very real. It started with a faint dripping sound in the stairwell, almost rhythmic, like a faucet left barely open. By the time Minji stepped into the hallway, water was trickling down the walls in thin, winding trails. Upstairs, a pipe had burst on the 9th floor, and gravity was carrying the mess to everyone below like an unstoppable tide. It didn't take long for the building to descend into chaos. Lights flickered, voices called from doorways. Wet footprints formed trails down the hall. The air smelled of rust and wet plaster. The superintendent, Kim Song-woo, showed up in shorts and a jacket thrown over his shoulders, wielding a heavy ring of keys and barking orders at the repairmen behind him. His frustration was loud as usual, half at the water, half at the building itself, like the structure had betrayed him personally. He banged on doors with the back of a flashlight, one by one. Tenants opened up, sleepy and irritated. Buckets were fetched, towels sacrificed. But when he reached Unit 4B, there was silence. Song-woo knocked again, louder this time. "Yoo Jae-hyun, see?" he called. No answer. Another knock. Nothing. Minji stood at her own door, plastic sandals squelching in the rising water, heart picking up speed. Something felt off, not just the flooding, not just the silence, but the specific absence of Jae-hyun, the man who was always there, always offering help, always watching. "Open it," someone muttered. Song-woo didn't hesitate. He cursed under his breath, shoved a master key into the lock, and forced the door open. It swung inward with a groan. Water spilled into the entryway, darkening the floor. But it wasn't the flood that made Minji forget how to breathe. It was what they found inside. The lights were on, casting a soft, even glow across a room that looked nothing like the man who smiled in the hallway. The living room was sparse, no couch, no TV playing in the background, no signs of leisure. Instead, at the center stood a folding table, the kind used in community centers or emergency shelters. Papers were stacked in rigid piles, bus schedules, subway maps, prepaid phone cards organized by provider. A metal cash box sat to one side, slightly open to reveal neat rows of small bills. On the far wall, a large corkboard stretched from waist to ceiling. It was filled with pinned notes, maps of the building, scribbled tags in black and red marker. Night shift 6A. Loan shark visits 3F. Tuesday evenings. Woman with limp lives alone 8C. Drunk husband returns weekends 2E. Each note had a pin. Some had strings connecting them to other notes, like a detective's crime board. It was eerily precise, not chaotic, not obsessive, methodical. Minji stepped into the apartment slowly, her socks soaking through as the water spread. Below the corkboard, against the TV stand, sat 3 small backpacks, children's sizes, lined up perfectly. Next to them was a dish filled with SIM cards, dozens of them, all labeled in minuscule handwriting. Active, dead, used 3X, HK. She didn't even realize she was holding her breath until the door to the bedroom creaked slightly open. The air shifted. Inside, lying among a tangle of fleece blankets and pillows, was a young girl, barely 7 years old if that. Her cheeks were flushed, she had a Band-Aid over one temple, cartoon print pajamas, and she was curled up with a stuffed rabbit. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. But nothing about the scene felt peaceful. Minji knew her name before anyone said it aloud. Kim Hai-ren. One of the names on the packages left at Jaehyun's door. A name she had seen scribbled on shipping labels, bundled with vitamins and soft shoes. The room suddenly felt too small. "Is this?" the superintendent started, but trailed off. Minji didn't answer. Her eyes had drifted to the laptop open on the table in the corner. It was a cheap model, screen cracked at one edge, but it was still running. On it, a grid of live camera feeds flickered in soft hues of gray and green. 10 feeds. Not the building's security system. Minji had seen the public lobby monitors. These were from odd, hidden angles. A stairwell landing, a view of the alley behind the garbage bins, the dim basement entrance. One was worse than the rest. It showed the hallway outside Minji's own door. Her welcome mat, her umbrella rack, time-stamped, archived in folders by date and hour. Each moment cataloged. Each frame proof that someone had been watching. Not just looking, but recording. Her mouth went dry. The air thickened. She took a step back. The superintendent let out a low whistle. What is this? Some kind of surveillance den? He reached for his phone, probably to snap a photo. His voice was more amused than alarmed, but it hit Minji like a cold wind. She could hear the gears in his head turning, like he was thinking of gossip, not danger. But Minji wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about how she had stood in front of that door, night after night, unlocking it with the same 3-number code. About how she had cried once in that hallway when no one was around. About how she had heard footsteps outside her apartment at 3 a.m., but convinced herself it was just thin walls and bad dreams. Her stomach twisted. Yoo Jae-hin's smile, that gentle, easy kindness, had been a curtain, a practiced expression. And behind it was a stage, built carefully, brick by brick, detail by detail. Scripts, props, exit strategies, a child asleep in a stranger's bedroom. And a hallway filled with people who had no idea that someone among them had been watching, not just out of concern, but with purpose.
By the time Yoo Jae-hin returned, the hallway was flooded with whispers and questions. He appeared from the stairwell, soaked from the rain, hair dripping into his eyes. In one hand, a crumpled convenience store bag sagged with 2 cartons of milk and a packet of instant noodles. He looked like someone who had stepped out for something ordinary, not someone about to walk into a storm. When he saw the open door to his apartment and the cluster of people inside, he froze, just for a second. Then, quietly, he stepped in. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't reach for explanations. He simply set the bag down, slowly, as if placing something fragile on the ground between him and the world. His eyes swept across the room, past the wet floors, the exposed corkboard, the open laptop, and landed on Minji. His voice, when he finally spoke, was steady, low, controlled. "Let me explain." The superintendent, Kim Song-woo, let out a scoffing laugh from the corner, arms folded across his chest, like a man who'd caught someone red-handed. "Explain to the police," he said, not even looking up from his buzzing phone. "You're done here." But Jae-hin didn't turn to him. His gaze stayed locked on Minji. Not pleading, not defensive, just direct, measured. Like he knew exactly what this moment demanded and exactly how little it would buy him. When he saw the corkboard and the open laptop, something else changed. "You don't know what this building is," he said. "Not really. You see broken mailboxes and peeling paint. I see refuge. This is where people come when the city stops caring." He took a step forward. No one stopped him. Undocumented cleaners, night workers with no contracts, students hiding from violent homes, women being tracked by people who know how to use technology better than the law can stop them. I give them names, sometimes phones. I teach them routes, show them exits. The cameras, they're not to invade, they're to protect. I watch the outside, the men who wait by the trash bins, the ones who follow but never knock. Minji didn't move. Her arms were crossed, but not from cold. There was something sharp in her silence now, not fear, judgment. Her voice, when it came, trembled not from weakness, but from rising anger. "You watched me." Jae-hyun didn't flinch. "I watched your hallway," he corrected gently. "Do you remember? 2 weeks ago, around 1:30 a.m., someone came, slammed your door, twice." The memory hit like a dropped stone in her chest. Her ex. He'd come back, furious, demanding answers she no longer owed. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't needed to. He'd left, just as quickly as he arrived. No damage, no scene. Now she understood why. "He saw the camera," Jae-hyun said, "and he left." Minji's throat tightened, but with a different kind of fear now. Not of being watched, but of having been studied, measured, recorded. Her vulnerability had been filed away like information in a spreadsheet. Her movements cataloged, her routines used without her consent. And now it wasn't protection. It felt like a violation. "You had no right," she said, her voice sharper now. "No right to take my pain and use it like it was part of your system." He looked away for the first time. His jaw clenched. There was no defense in his expression, only weariness, and something close to guilt. "You're right," he said softly. "I didn't ask. I should have, but I couldn't afford to." He gestured vaguely toward the hallway, toward the bedroom. "The girl," he added, and this time his voice cracked, not audibly, but enough for Minji to hear it in the pause between his words. "Her name is Kim Hyren. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her stepfather, Park Dae-sik, used to wait in the alley behind the school. I needed to know his patterns, what nights he came, what time he showed up. That's why the cameras are there. That's why I knew when to bring her here." Minji didn't answer. Her chest felt tight. Her fingers curled unconsciously at her sides. There was too much weight in the room, too much truth, and not enough air. Song-woo's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the corkboard, eyes scanning the colored pens and labels. Something in his face shifted. The playfulness was gone. Minji followed his gaze. She saw it too. The tags didn't just describe tenants. They described activity, visitors, patterns. One line read, "Loan shark visits 3F, Tuesday nights." Another read, "Cash drops, alleyway, 11:30 p.m., supervisor present." And suddenly, the superintendent's face changed. Not anger, not fear, recognition. "You think you're some hero," Song-woo muttered, but his voice had lost its strength. He turned away. "Fine, I'm calling this in." He stepped outside, the phone already to his ear, but his hand shook slightly. Minji's breath came faster now, not from panic, something more complicated, something deeper. The kind of feeling that crawls up your spine when the floor you thought you were standing on starts to tilt. Then, from the bedroom, the sound of movement, small feet on laminate flooring, the creak of a stuffed animal being squeezed. Minji turned and saw Hyren standing there. Her eyes were half closed, one side of her face pillow-creased, a quiet child in a room too tense for innocence. And she didn't go to Jae-hyun. She walked straight to Minji. Without saying anything, she slid her small hand into Minji's. "Ajuma," she whispered, soft, hesitant. The word hit harder than anything else had. It wasn't just a title. It was a choice, a call for safety.
a child deciding who to trust when everything else in her life had fractured. Minji squeezed her hand back. But before she could respond, a sudden flutter from the corkboard drew her eyes. A loose Polaroid photo, loosened by the draft from the hallway door, landed near her feet. She bent and picked it up. A night scene, the alley behind the building. A man with a cigarette, captured mid-turn. His arm was lifted, hand clenched around something long, maybe a pipe or a stick. But it wasn't the weapon that stopped her breath. It was the ring. Thick, silver, set with a carved tiger. Its face glinted beneath the alley light like it was snarling. And Minji had seen that ring before. On the hand of Kim Song-woo, the superintendent. The same ring he wore every time he signed for someone's parcel. Every time he took out the trash late at night. Every time he smiled like he didn't know more than he should. The air around her dropped a degree. Minji straightened, eyes meeting Jae-hyun's. He said nothing. He didn't need to. In that moment, they both knew. This wasn't just about hidden cameras or borrowed names. This was about control, and who had been silently pulling strings in the building while smiling to their faces. The kindness hadn't just hidden Jae-hyun's secrets. It had hidden a larger, far darker one. And now, the real story was beginning to bleed through the cracks.
It happened faster than anyone could fully process, and yet every second felt stretched thin, like time itself was holding its breath. The hallway was still wet from the burst pipe earlier that morning, the floor slick and gleaming under overhead fluorescence. Water pooled around the baseboards. Somewhere, a broken sprinkler continued to drip. And then they appeared. 3 men, moving like a single thread. At the center, Park Dae-sik, tall, broad, and built like someone who rarely heard the word no. His black leather jacket creaked as he walked, eyes sharp, mouth curled in a half-smile that held no warmth. Flanking him were 2 others, younger but hardened, their boots hitting the floor with deliberate force. Just behind them, struggling to keep pace, was Superintendent Kim Sang-woo. He looked pale, sweat blooming along his temples despite the cool hallway air. His fingers twitched nervously at his sides, and on one of those fingers, unmistakable now under the harsh light, was the tiger ring from the photo. Silver, heavy, watching. They didn't speak at first. They didn't have to. The hallway, already tense from the earlier revelations, turned charged. Minji instinctively stepped in front of Hae-ren, who had clutched her hand with more strength than a child her age should need. The girl's breathing hitched, hiccuping now, fast and shallow. Her other hand clung to the sleeve of Minji's sweater, silent but pleading. Park's voice broke the stillness like gravel dragged across stone. "Where's my girl?" he growled, his gaze locking on Hae-ren. "She belongs at home." Home. The word rang false, a weapon dressed in something familiar. It wasn't concern, it was possession. But before Minji could answer, Jae-hyun stepped forward. No bags, no smile, just a steady posture and empty hands, raised slightly at his sides, not in surrender, but in control. "She belongs," he said evenly, "where she's not afraid." A flicker passed through Park's expression, half surprise, half amusement. He let out a low, humorless chuckle. "You?" he said. "You're still playing the guardian angel routine? Don't forget, I know exactly who you are. You used to work for me, remember?" His voice turned sharp, loud enough for the open doors along the hallway to catch the echo. "Don't pretend you're clean." Silence followed. Then, slowly, like dominoes tipping in slow motion, apartment doors creaked open. Faces emerged from behind them. Tenants, students, mothers, a delivery kid in uniform, even the elderly woman from 8C with her walker, all drawn by the tension in the air. They didn't speak, but they watched. Park noticed them too. He didn't care. With a sudden, practiced motion, he shoved Jae-hyun hard in the chest. Jae-hyun staggered but didn't fall. And then he spoke, quietly, coldly. "I broke bones for men like you," he said. "I know exactly what fear does to people.
That's why I left. That's why I started over." His eyes didn't flinch as he turned slightly, just enough to glance at Minji. "And this," he added, "is how I'm paying it back." Minji felt her breath catch, because suddenly it made sense. The corkboard, the maps, the fake names, the hidden cameras, his relentless calm, his kindness. It wasn't a mask. It was penance. The smile had hidden guilt, yes, but not just to cover his tracks. It was how he survived what he'd been and what he refused to be again. But the man in front of them, Park Dae-sik, had no such burden. He moved with the confidence of someone used to control rooms, people, and consequences. He raised a fist. It was instinct, pure, unfiltered instinct, that drove Minji to slam her hand against the red fire alarm on the wall. The hallway erupted. Sirens shrieked. Flashing lights strobed red. From above, leftover pressure in the broken sprinkler system hissed out in bursts, sending down cold droplets that scattered like warning rain. Somewhere, an emergency light buzzed to life, casting flickering shadows over the floor. Park spun toward her, eyes wild with fury. But he didn't move fast enough. Doors flew open. Neighbors stepped out fully now, phones raised, cameras rolling. The age of silence was over. One voice yelled, "That's him." Another, in the chaos, cried, "Child abduction." Not entirely true, but not entirely false either. And that word changed everything. Sang-woo froze. The tiger ring on his hand now burned under a dozen camera flashes. He tried to retreat, waving his hands, stammering something unintelligible. But the crowd had already seen him. And worse, they remembered the ring. From the packages, from the front desk, from the nights he always happened to be nearby. Jae-yun moved, grabbing Park's arm mid-swing. They grappled for a second, tension radiating through clenched jaws and locked shoulders. But this time, it wasn't just between them. A security guard, one of the part-time night staff, rushed in from the stairwell, forcing himself between them. "Break it up," he shouted, arms out. Jae-yun let go. Park stepped back, breathing hard, fury lighting up every tendon in his neck. Minji didn't wait. She scooped up Hae-rin and pushed her gently into the arms of the woman from 5A, who had stepped forward, arms open and steady. "Stay with her," Minji told the woman. Then she turned and moved toward Jae-yun, not with fear, but with something closer to conviction. She stood by his side. Not because she trusted him completely, not because she forgave him, but because no one else was standing between right and wrong. Not today. Sirens howled from outside. Then, footsteps. 2 police officers stormed up the stairs, radios crackling, one hand each near their belts. The older of the 2, a compact man with tired eyes and a calm authority, took one look at the scene. Wet floor, tense bodies, a child crying softly against a stranger's coat, the glint of a silver tiger on Sang-woo's finger. His voice cut through the noise like a clean blade. "Hands where I can see them." And just like that, for once, the men who were used to getting their way obeyed.
The aftermath stretched longer than anyone expected. Statements took hours. Names were written, rewritten. Questions were asked again and again. Details clarified, timelines confirmed. The officers worked late into the night, recording everything, down to the brand of batteries in the hidden cameras. Evidence took longer. The corkboard was carefully dismounted and bagged. The laptop's hard drive imaged, SIM cards cataloged. Each Ziploc sandwich labeled with a fake name was photographed. And, most damning of all, video stills, time-stamped, showing the glint of Sang-woo's tiger ring as he silently opened the building's back door well past midnight for a man he claimed not to know. The quiet man with tired eyes, Detective Lee Jun-ho, stood at the center of it all, arms folded, watching the pieces fall into place with a weariness that spoke of having seen too many people like Park and too few like Jae-hyun. When the social worker arrived, the hallway felt suddenly softer. Her name was Seo Hae-jin,
one of the many names that had once appeared on Jahan's packages. She wore a long navy coat and spoke gently, like someone trained to carry another person's panic without flinching. She crouched in front of Hayrin, wrapped her in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and lemon. "Let's get you somewhere warm," she said. Then she looked up at Minji, at Jahan. "You both did the right thing," she said, simply. Neither of them responded. They both flinched, as if the words struck something raw. Because doing the right thing didn't erase how messy it had been. It didn't change the secrets, the cameras, the moments they hadn't spoken when they should have. Relief doesn't come clean. It arrives tangled, tired, and never quite on time. Detective Lee surveyed the contents of the apartment one last time. The table, the burner phones, the wall of names. "You're not a saint," he said, looking directly at Jahan, "but you're not our biggest problem today." And just like that, the balance tilted. Charges landed where they should. Park Dae-sik, assault, child endangerment, and obstruction. His past record didn't help him, nor did the witnesses. Kim Song-woo, aiding and abetting, illegal access to tenant spaces, coercion. He was removed from his position before sunrise. The tiger ring was taken as evidence. Jahan was not spared. He was fined for unauthorized surveillance and operating an unregistered shelter. It could have been worse. It should have been worse. But context matters. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He stood still as it all landed. Later, in the empty hallway outside 4B, he turned to Minji. The same hallway where this had all started. Just another corridor in an aging Seoul building. Only now it felt like something had shifted beneath the paint and plaster. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice wasn't confident anymore. It was real, unpolished, threaded with wear, like something carried too long. "I should have asked," he said. "I told myself secrets were safer than consent, that if no one knew, they couldn't say no. But that wasn't protection, that was cowardice." Minji said nothing for a long time. She wanted to hold on to her anger. It had been a lifeline for so long. It gave her shape when everything else had been stripped away. But anger has a shelf life. And now, standing in a hallway with open doors and watchful neighbors, she realized something had changed. This place had once taught her to hide. Now it had learned to stand up. Someone passed by with a tray of hot tea. Someone else handed over a towel. The building wasn't healed, but it had grown a spine. Weeks passed. The rain softened. The pipes were fixed. The hallways dried, but the memory of that night lingered in quiet gestures. Unlocked doors during the day, conversations at the mailbox, neighbors asking, "Have you eaten?" in a way that meant something more. One afternoon, Minji walked across town to a small community center tucked behind a row of hardware shops. Inside, the air smelled faintly of rice and printer ink. She found Jahan there, unloading boxes of donated blankets, part of his court-ordered service. He didn't look surprised to see her, only a little tired, a little older, like time had finally caught up with him. The walls were freshly painted. On one side hung a new bulletin board, but not filled with names or pins. Instead, it held a schedule of self-defense classes, free legal aid, mental health sessions, and language support groups. At the center was a drawing, childlike and bright. 3 stick figures under a red umbrella. One tall, one short, one in the middle with pigtails. Above them, messy crayon letters spelled out a name, Hayrin. At the bottom corner, in bold, jagged strokes, a silver ring with a tiger was crossed out in thick red X's. Minji smiled, despite herself. "You still smile too much," she said. Jahan set down a box and leaned against the table. "It's how I keep from running," he admitted, "from what I used to be." She studied him. Not the polished version from the hallway, but this one, the one without the curtain. The edges visible, the doubt, the effort. "Then let the rest of us see the edges," she said. "We'll decide what to do with them." He didn't smile right away, but when he did, it was real. Outside, scooters hissed past in the drizzle. A dog barked from a rooftop. The city moved on, as it always did. Back in the building, Unit 4B sat quiet. The cameras were gone, but in the lobby, the extra umbrellas remained, neatly arranged, ready for anyone who might forget theirs. A small sign read, "Take one, return when you can." Relief, Minji realized, wasn't always loud. It didn't arrive in triumphant music or dramatic speeches. Sometimes it was just a breath you didn't realize you were holding, finally released. Sometimes it was standing in a hallway with the doors open, knowing people were watching each other for the right reasons. The smile that came next, seen from the far end of the hall as Jahan passed by with an armful of flyers, wasn't hiding anything anymore. It didn't need to. It simply said, "We're still here." And that, for the first time in a long time, was enough.